Hey guys, it's Samuel Larsen here, and I'm excited to bring you part 2 of my Digital Elite Camp 2017 notes series. So in the part 1 we went pretty deep on the first couple of talks. It looks like it's going to be around 4-part series at this point, so we'll just keep going where we left on. So the first talk of the part 2 is by Daria Nepriakina. And she talked a lot about understanding the customer and how we actually need to first understand the customer before we can actually even have a product. So let's jump a little bit deeper into this. She introduced this problem solution fit canvas. So basically your product needs to fit a problem, and we're going to go into it a little bit more. So let's start with this. If you don't know your customer well, you will be blind and optimize randomly. Your assumptions will be 99% wrong. Now, questions for you. Do you think you know your customer? And after you answer that, like most people think, yes, I know. It's this demographic, this kind of thing, this kind of thing, this kind of thing. But how deeply do you know? Do you really know your customer? Do you know what keeps them up at night, so to say? What's their emotional hot buttons? What motivates them, etc. Oftentimes, it can be quite complicated, and there's no easy answers here. So you have to be aware of exactly how they decide, how they act, what they value, etc. It goes back to talk number 1, part 1 of the series. If you don't know what is value, you cannot deliver value. So you need to constantly ask yourself what is value, and then you will be able to, like a great salesman, pitch to that particular person or a group of people. So this is why oftentimes optimizers, they form user personas, and copywriters do this as well. So this is the kind of people or person we are selling to. And then after you have that, after you have clarity on there, you will be able to craft your message a lot better than you would be otherwise. So that's a very useful experience and exercise for everybody to take on, because then you kind of form this very detailed image of Jack, 34, has 2 children named Alex and Alice, etc. And he's an engineer. You go really, really deep and specific, and then you have 3 to 4 of those user personas, and suddenly your website will actually sell to a person and not just an audience. So you can take that into account. And this goes and very well fits with this point. So if you knew your customer like a friend, you would know how to sell to them. So if you have this very detailed user persona, you will know how to pitch these people. And if you know, let's say a friend of yours or somebody you know very well, a loved one, you would be basically able to tailor the pitch or whatever you're trying to persuade them to do to exactly match their motivations and fears if you tried it, So that is why it's very good to know the customer. And also why a lot of optimizers, they start from the user research and don't just assume things, but actually ask these things, because there's always something that you didn't expect. So if you are in business, people are your subject to study. I just love that quote. If you are in business, then people are your subject to study. So it's about people at the end of the day. People are using your products, people are buying your stuff. So we tend to be too focused on the product and not enough focused on the people using the product. So this is very common with startups, that they get this great idea, or supposedly great idea, and then they just get very stuck with that idea, like, we like it like this, but then nobody else is like them really, and the product just flops. It's a waste, it's a massive waste that these people could have avoided if they were just open-minded and willing to study their customers. And this is why research is important. Data tells you what. So you can look at your Google Analytics, you can look whatever analytics software you're using, and look back at it like, this is what happened. Okay, very nice, that happened. That probably tells you something, but you really need to do deep research to understand why. So something's happening, but data doesn't tell you why. So that's where you need the human involvement there, and you need the empathy, you need to be willing to understand and listen. So that's about that part. But really, one of my favorite quotes from the seminar again. So this is a very good talk for the quotes. If there is no existing behavior, then there is no problem to solve. So think about it. What is the scratch or the itch you're looking to scratch? So if people don't actually have a problem, it's almost impossible to sell them on the solution. And this is why it's very difficult to convert so-called cold leads if you're in sales and you have people that don't really care. So you don't even have their attention enough for you to sell to them a completely valid solution. You need to have that at least a little bit of initial interest. So they need to be in the playing field for you to pass them to the ball. So if they're not there, if they're, for example, they're not using cell phone, you can't sell them an app. And this needs to be a real problem. So marketers oftentimes tell you that problems can be created, and probably some people manage to create problems and then solve them. So let me think of an example. All right, here's a couple of examples. Here's fidget spinner. Another one would be iPhone when it first came out. That was a big problem solver, and people didn't really want to watch movies from their cell phone or listen to music from their phones, whatever. But suddenly they had the need when this solution was introduced. There's all kinds of disruptors. Uber would be a great example as well. But these are very, very rare. So usually you need to have the behavior before you can solve a problem. So yeah, just focus on this, you'll be a lot more successful. Then nextly, really, again, you should understand your demographics so well that you can recognize them on the street. So once you have the user personas down, then you will be able to really categorize people that, like, that is my buyer, that is not my buyer, very easily. So that's that talk. Next, we are going to dive into content with Shuhan Patel. And this will be a very different one from that little bit zero focus talk. Now we are talking about traffic, and traffic with SEO and traffic with content, really. So this is how it's going to go. You have a blog or articles, and nobody's really watching them. Nobody's checking them, or at least you're not getting the traffic that you wanted to. Maybe your traffic is even going down a little bit and you can't really figure out why. Now, probably the reason is that SEO, content, articles, they're all getting more competitive these days, and it will be a lot harder to stand out with an article in the future. So it used to be that you could just write an article and you could pretty much rank well on Google. Like some people would find it originally, organically, even without much searching. Now that is a lot tougher these days because everybody wants to be there and people have, in a sense, figured it out. And this will happen to all mediums over time. Just wait, it will happen to Facebook ads, Instagram influencers, whatever you can think of. Everything will be exposed in a sense. And once it's exposed, once it's trendy, once it's mainstream, once there's 10,000 blogs written about it, people will use it, and then it will get tougher and tougher. So that is why in 2017 we need to be able to create something that is significantly better than our competitors have. So why is this? It's really because average doesn't stand out anymore, and average really isn't remarkable, as Seth Godin would say. It won't bring you any points, it's just average. So the world doesn't need more content, it needs better content. So we don't need more articles, we need more amazing articles, we need more helpful articles, we need maybe longer articles, more in-depth articles. Basically, we need our problem solved, and preferably solved better than anybody else can. That's how you can stand out in today's world. So really, it's becoming important to write better articles rather than write a lot of articles. So make sure what you publish is actually better than your competitors. That's how you stand out. That's how you make your customers happy. Now, there's other content strategies that you can use. So if you are just coming up in the game, whatever you're doing, you can always align yourself with other successful brands and leverage their brand. And what I mean by this is, let's say you have an e-commerce site and you're selling dog products, for example. Now, there's a lot of sites, blogs, etc. that are looking for content writers, are looking for somebody to help them write content, be an expert on something, etc. So if you can be there for them, help them out, and then leverage their brand, leverage their visitors, just very minorly, maybe one link to your website at the end of it. That's good for SEO, but it's also good for publicity. So if you're on these favorable blogs, you instantly get the social proof, and you seem a lot more valuable that way. You seem trustworthy and like a friend, so to say. So people won't have as many objections to buying from you, since you were already featured in the site. Now, as an independent professional, I've used this as well. So whatever big brands you get to work with, it's very typical for agencies. If they're working with Nike, they're going to tell that they're working with Nike, and I would as well. So leverage everything you can in terms of this. This is a great thing for you to really leapfrog over the competition. So let's keep going. Less content, but better content. Fewer posts, but epic posts. So really similar things as we said. You only need a handful of epic articles. So it goes to the Pareto principles. Really, if you were to audit all your blogs, probably maybe 10% of them will bring 90% of results, or maybe it's more like 20-80. But you will see that your most popular blog posts will be by far the ones that are bringing way more traffic than the other ones combined. So keep this in mind and seek to optimize those posts. Make sure that they're up to date, make sure the content structure is great, make sure that you have appropriate lead capture there, and it's not just very generic stuff. Make sure that the related articles are great, etc. So focus on these epic posts and focus on making them more epic. Rather than being average throughout the board, you get to be great at some articles. And the great thing with this, if you focus on these 80-20 principles with your blog posts, you actually get to have industry leading posts. So maybe you have a very long tail keyword, maybe let's say you're selling car parts for a particular model, and it's like model from 1982, and then you have a long post there, but everybody who searches for that particular model is going to get to your page, and you have a great offer there. Now, by optimizing that post, you get very targeted traffic, and you know exactly how to sell to them, rather than having a bunch of posts that you can't really capture that well, because at the end of the day you only have 24 hours a day. All right, so the definition of epic: simply one notch better than your best content from the competitors. And the idea here is to really rank well. So you only need to rank one place better than the current number one in Google. Sounds easy, right? But it probably isn't. But you can look at your competitors' content as a benchmark. So this is what we want to out-compete. And if you can do that, then you're going to do very well. Really, like this is all you really need to do. So if there was one content strategy, it would be create posts that are just a little bit better than your competitors have. But a great idea here introduced here is the idea of a content circle. So what is a content circle? You take something that is your core content. So if you're selling pet products, for example, you will kind of like deviate from that a little bit. So pet products, maybe pet care would be one. Pet care would be, you could then circle around from that to something like how to choose your dog training or something like that. That could like be another one. And then you would kind of like circle. Try to have a lot of related articles, and like then everything will be around your products. So it doesn't need to be that specific. It would just need to be something useful for that audience. So we're essentially broadening the scope. And a lot of people are not willing to do this because it's not very directly related to selling your product. But in a sense it is, because these people are exactly your target audience that are reading this post. And by being engaging and having these people read your articles, you will be able to, in a sense, sell to them at the same time. So it doesn't need to be very specific what you're writing about. You can write about something completely else, as long as it is for that audience and it's somewhat related to what you're doing. Now, there is different phases that customers are in. So A popular strategy on YouTube, for example, is to create content for the so-called bottom end of the funnel customers. So these are your loyal fans. So for those, you would create behind the scenes content. And what this would look like is content that is about like the person's brand. So I would go ahead and like film a client meeting or something like that, film how I work around. That would be behind the scenes content for this channel. And you're kind of like bonding that last relationship with the client, making them understand you. And the reason why this is the bottom end of the funnel content is that really people that are on the front end, they don't really care about that yet. So nobody cares about you until they have seen the value. And that's that really. Then one thing also you can do with your blog is simply show people that are successful with your product, but be a little bit careful with this because it's always very salesy. And while being salesy is actually good, if you overdo it, then that will kind of like ruin your blog because it's just going to be a sales letter pretty much. So don't be afraid to show people that are successful without your product and that are relatable as well. So basically they have in a sense solved the problems, or maybe their problems are not even related to your product, but they are still people that the audience can relate to. And then you can there push your product a little bit more discreetly on those articles. All right, so that was content, very interesting. Everybody needs more leads, more visitors, etc. So it's something that we shouldn't overlook. But let's get back to CRO. So research. On the first talk of this part, we talked about user personas, etc. So let's talk about user research and so-called moderated user testing. So moderated user testing is simply basically you give somebody at Starbucks, for example, a laptop, like, and some kind of mission, and then you watch how they do it. It could be anything like iPhone, go search this product or something like that from Google, and then perhaps they end up in your site. You get to see how they navigate the site, how they're behaving. They can tell you what kind of problems they are, what kind of concerns they are having, etc. So it's a way to get into the customer's mind. And the idea here with the moderated user testing is that once we build a site, first of all, we are not the target audience most of the time. And secondly, we already know how to use the site, we know the product, we know the benefits, etc. So we are affected by this so-called curse of knowledge, where we cannot really unknow what we already know. And that's why we cannot do this user testing part ourselves, and why we need to have people complete these tasks, etc. So user testing is a very down in the dirt type of activity. You go to the field, whatever, coffee shop, etc., find people, or do it online. There's user testing sites that you can also leverage. But what you're really looking to do here is have people complete actions and then see how they do it, and always trust their actions. So they're going to say that this site is the best site I've ever been to because they're just polite. And what you need to do is see beyond that and actually see how they perform. And this is why I actually like Hotjar recordings, for example, a lot. where you get this screen recording of people using the site. These are real people, real shoppers. The problem with this is that you don't actually hear what they're saying. You don't hear what is going in their head. And while you can watch it, it's still a little bit different thing because you don't know that much about them. So this is a way to get more in depth with this kind of testing. And you don't need to do too much of this. Usually, I think if you just test 10 people, you will uncover 90% of the problems already. So there's a lot of very quickly diminishing returns with this. But a great way to also test whether your site is working and how it's working in the actual customer end when it's used by real people, real time, to solve real problems. All right, that's that talk. Then we'll have a little bit of a shorter ones because not every talk I get so much insight. Oftentimes I'm pretty proficient on these things already, so that's why there's not many notes from every talk. But next we're going to talk about data, and really data and experimentation. So how can you take your startup or e-commerce store, whatever website, and make it succeed fast? So the first step is to admit that you actually don't have all the answers. And that's counterintuitive. If you want to succeed fast, you probably think that you would need to act fast, do every type of things. And while you do, oftentimes this process involves a lot of learning. So just admit to yourself, we are not always smarter. We don't have all the answers. Other people, generally, if you look longer enough, you will find somebody that is smarter than you. Fact. But what we can be, if you're not smarter, we can be faster. So by being faster, we can learn quicker. And by learning quicker, we can outperform those people that are simply smarter, since oftentimes smart people may not be great learners. So the idea here, fail forward fast. And why do you want to do this? You want to do this because every experiment is either validating something or disvalidating something. And if you're failing forward fast, you are moving forward even if you're failing. And what I mean by this, because oftentimes you think if I fail, I fail. There's nothing to benefit from a failure. But once you create your experiments in a way that is beneficial and it's actually smart, you're always validating something. So there's always something to learn. Don't run experiments that have zero things to learn about them. So those are not useful. So it's not just about optimizing a website, it's also about learning about it. And you can get a lot of really good information just by running A/B tests, for example. And really, this is the only way you can achieve true competitive advantage. Because you might be the best today, but first of all, marketplace is changing. So what is actually best is changing all the time. So there's this disrupting element going on, but also your competitors are not resting on their laurels either. So they're always coming closer to you and competing with you. So if you're not experimenting, if you're not doing something differently every day, every week, every month, then you're simply gonna get passed by. And if there is not a true experimenter culture, I think this word here is very important, true. because there's experimental cultures that are they're very fake. So people are like, yeah, we're looking to learn, etc. But they're not really looking to learn. They're just looking to validate their own awesomeness. So if there's a true humble experimental culture, that is a way that can lead to competitive advantage. This is also why a lot of great companies, they only hire very bright people, even if they're way more expensive than the average people. But these people can experiment, they can use these smarts to create competitive advantage to Google, to Facebook, to whatever it is. So that's very important. All right, so let's go on to the next couple talks. Christopher Ewald and modern measurement strategies. Just a couple things here, really. Preferably we want to use weighted conversions, not just conversions. And this is an issue that will make your testing quite a bit more complicated, because you might be useful using just the conversion rate or revenue as your metric. But once you really get to the enterprise level, you want to use more complicated models. And this is where you would use weighted conversions rather than just conversions. So we would take into account a customer's lifetime value, LTV, rather than just conversions. And why is LTV important? Well, if you think about it, you are paying a certain amount of money to get a customer. This is always the case, whether you're blogging, whether you're Facebook advertising, whether you're even doing word of mouth. Your time has a monetary value. And to truly understand how much you can pay for this kind of customer, you need to know, and know pretty accurately, what is your lifetime value of this customer. So if he's only buying once, you might be actually losing money. And a lot of online marketing funnels are at best break even if the customer only buys the tripwire, for example. So as a typical online marketing funnel would be a very $7 entry level offer, maybe like upsell for 47, second upsell 97, third upsell 297, etc. So you would always go up, but that tripwire, this that $7 foot in the door offer usually doesn't make you that much money, if at all. So that's why once you optimize for conversions, once you know the LTV, you will be a lot better at allocating your capital and resources to different type of advertising mediums. And really, all your tests would get different results if you were to measure LTV. So this is something to be conscious of, but I would say though, if you're not doing a really big operation, you probably don't need to worry about this too much at this point, because you will you'll be okay just measuring the conversions. There's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, it's a hassle to measure LTV, but also if you don't have your upsells, cross-sells, etc. in place very well, then you're not going to make that much money in the back end anyway. Now, a great medium that I think everybody should measure LTV at or with is the email subscriber. So what is the lifetime value of somebody filling in your email opt-in form? And once you know that, you will be actually a lot better at allocating and calculating the return on investment on your advertising as well. Now, another thing here is that cookies are dying actually. And why is this important? Well, with a lot of A/B testing tools, or with all of them really, at this point, they use cookies. So you land on a certain variation. There's control and variation, for example. If you land on the variation, you will see that variation with that same browser, with that same device, always. So you'll have a cookie in your computer, in your browser, that will identify you as the one that is on that bracket. So this has two things. You go back, you only see the variation, and you check out. They know that you were on the variation groups. But once cookies die, there's a big problem. And cookies are dying. There's a lot of browsers that are now eliminating cookies completely. So I think this is already in Safari, in Macs, etc. So this is coming. But there's a solution for this problem, and it's the so-called device graph. And this might actually be a good thing, because with device graph, this will identify what kind of services you logged into. So if you logged into Facebook, if you logged into Google, this will actually be able to identify that, and then they can show you and categorize you into tests based on that. And really, we're all logged into something these days. So very few people log out of Facebook every time, and log out of Google as well every time they stop using it. So that will be very useful, and I think it's a good thing to also be able to identify these users, even though there's a lot of outcry about it. All right, the last talk of the day is from Jeff Sawyer, and this is about attribution. So attribution is, for example, if you have a marketing campaign and you want to kind of like nominate the actual sale to a one particular campaign. So it's very typical in conversion paths to have multiple touch points. So think of this example, for example. Let's say I'm looking for a new shirt. First of all, I saw a shirt ad in the banner of a blog. So that would be the first touch point. So just a view. Then maybe I saw a shirt ad on Facebook randomly. So that would be from the same company. That would be a second touch point. And thirdly, I went to Google, searched for a shirt, clicked on the first ad, bought. Okay, so 3 touch points. Now ask which of these actually gets the sale. Like which of these, like how should we say, like, okay, you played this part, you played this part, and you played this part. Now by default on Google, the last click will get the sale. So it's the so-called last click attribution. And there's different ones. You could go evenly with this, so 33, 33, 33, or you could go first click 100% 0, 0, or you normally it's last click, so 100% 0, 0 this way. You could go and do a custom model. So for example, 50, 0, 50, or 25, 25, 50, something like that. Now, if you run a small company, you don't really need to worry about this, especially because most of your advertising is probably pretty simple. So what you have is a simplistic model, and that's working for you. So this guy, Jeff here, he identifies the stages. So first stage is that you don't have any conversion tracking at all. This is basically level 0. It's marked there as 1, but more fairly it would be level 0, because you have done nothing and you basically are not even in the game. But let's assume most of you have this analog attribution. So this is the so-called last click attribution, the default. So the funny thing is here, like coffee is for closers. Many of you might know that. So this is like the full attribution. All the glory goes to that who bring in the sale in the very last part, even though the other parts might have played a part of it. Then there's the so-called digital attribution. So this could be a custom model, for example, a first-click attribution. Now, this worked in 2007, but it's not so good anymore because people have different devices. You probably have a couple of devices on the desktop right now. If you're watching this on the computer, you probably have a computer, cell phone, maybe a tablet, etc. So we are not shopping on one device anymore. And the thing with multi-device is that cookies get deleted and also devices change. So that's a huge problem, right? How do you attribute if you see this on the desktop first and then you go and buy on mobile? It's very difficult. That's why also last click also works pretty well. So there is really no absolute right attribution models. People are always looking to find out, like, just tell me what's the truth. Like, what do you recommend? And like, every business is still unique. And these kind of models need to be unique to your business as well. So you need to test them. A great thing is though, like these are free in Google Analytics, and you can test these models and see if you are getting any different results. Most likely, and based on what I've seen, is that there might be like 5% difference between these. But in general, the last click attribution is pretty powerful. Now, you might want to customize that a little bit. So for example, display ads, even though they somewhat work, they still don't get that many clicks. So almost nobody clicks on banners anymore. But they can be great for branding, etc. still. And one great thing that is coming out, possibly great, is the Google Attribution. So Google is realizing that this is a problem for a lot of people, and they're coming up with their own data-driven attribution model. And I'm looking forward to this. It's coming out somewhere later in 2017. There's not an official published date yet, but this will be a computer model that will or should solve this. Now, a little thing here to keep in mind though is that this is a Google's attribution thing, and they're also a big advertising medium, so this might be biased towards Google, and that might be something you need to look out for and take into account, because of course when big money moves, there's an incentive to just look Google through the Google lenses and be a little bit more favorable than you would otherwise be. But that's really the three. Now the highest level is the multi-touch point attribution model. So this is where you would actually decide that once they see the display ad, it would be like 20%, 20%, 60%, for example. So the traffic is, or the actual glory is divided evenly between the touch points. Now, to finish off today's video, let's keep in mind that everyone wants to attribute. I've had clients that have come to me and they just say like, yeah, I really want to do attribution. I have no idea about how my marketing money is spending and how it's working for me. Now, there's a saying about this, that half your marketing money is wasted. You just don't know which half. And that's really the problem that attribution is trying to solve. And many people are looking for a lot of like complexity, complex models. They think complex models are always more accurate. But when it comes to attribution, you don't need to have anything too complicated. So if you have a simple campaign, just use simple attribution as well. that is the solution for you. And then if you have a really big business, if you're making a lot of sales, say 10,000 conversions, then start thinking about custom attribution and start thinking about how you could really have a model that most accurately describes how you're getting customers to buy and how those marketing money is spent, etc. So you can go really deep on this. There's even TV attribution. So nowadays we can take a look at if we show an advertisement on TV at certain hours, we can see how our website traffic is affected from that. And then we can combine those sales to similar numbers and pretty much exactly pinpoint what kind of effect that had on our sales. So people say that you can't measure TV. It's actually wrong. They do that all the time with Google. They have this kind of genius data distributor team that are able to measure everything. So with computer models that are going to be more and more available and popular, you will be able to pinpoint these things more and more accurately. But that's really about attribution, and that's also today's video. So I very much hope you like listening to me for 47 minutes. And if you will like more of me and the CRO tips that I provide, please make sure to subscribe for the channel and also like the video. It's very motivating to see people liking and commenting on my work. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Cheers.